Chapter 22. Slaying the Dragon. Lawrence was disgusted with himself. He'd been caught off guard something like 3 or 4 times now, and by these two. This last time had been the worst. Tucker, who by all accounts should have been out of this fight for good, had somehow found the strength to not only pick himself up and keep going, but to transfer his soul instantaneously into the air and the ground and conjure up real fire. It was almost stunning. Exciting molecules so quickly that they caught fire in an instant, like striking a match using only soul, was an incredibly advanced technique. And yet this amateur had managed to discover that ability seemingly on instinct. Now Lawrence was surrounded by a literal wall of fire. The air around him heated up incredibly fast, leaving him gasping for breath, his eyes dry and stinging. "This is ridiculous," he thought. "How can 2 amateurs push me to the brink like this?" More so than the heat of the fire, it was the mere prospect that this fight was still going on that stunned Lawrence still. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been made to work so hard for a victory. Was he going soft? It was a stupid thought, one that didn't make any logical sense, and yet, in that moment, the memory of his avatar's claws piercing his opponent's body flashed again in his mind, and his stomach churned. As quickly as he could, he put that image back out of mind and looked up. The flames rose up around him like a circle of pillars, but they didn't cut him off from the sky. He could still see the moon directly above, only a bit distorted by the rising heat. It would be a simple matter of summoning his wings and flying straight up to escape. Then he would create his full-body avatar and attack with everything he had. Strong or not, resilient or not, his 2 opponents wouldn't last much longer. They couldn't. Lawrence allowed his attack arms to fade away, and streamers of golden light spread from his shoulder blades, weaving together and then solidifying into broad, translucent golden wings. He spread them to their full length, their tips touching the flames. He could already feel the hot, rising air catching his wings, lifting them up. He was about to flap them, to quite literally rise above his problems, when the flames parted and Tucker stepped slowly, deliberately through them. With the flickering flames at his back, he actually looked intimidating. Lawrence was surprised again, and he didn't have time to switch to either his attack or his defense arms before the dueling heart was upon him. Lawrence felt energy roll off his assailant. The heat surrounding them both churned, and Tucker's fiery aura sprang to life around him as he threw a punch at Lawrence's face. He followed it up with another strike, and then another, attacking as rapidly as he could, pressing Lawrence, keeping him off balance. He had to direct all of his focus toward deflecting Tucker's attacks, leaving him virtually no opportunity to attack back, let alone change avatars or create his own aura. The 2 of them were trapped in a small space, surrounded by flames that had clearly licked Tucker's body as he had passed through them. He was immune, or at least resistant, to the flames, where Lawrence was not, giving him one more thing to worry about. Yet, despite his lack of aura, he was able to keep up with his opponent, and his opponent seemed to be wearing down. He was breathing heavily and winced with every movement. His wound wasn't healed yet, not even close, and once again he had acted on impulse and made a mistake. Lawrence smirked. Tucker had chosen not to snuff out his flames, which had put Lawrence off guard for sure, but it had also cut Tucker off from his ally. She would never be able to reach them here. Lawrence would wear him down and finish him off once and for all. That would leave only Jen, who didn't stand a chance against him in a prolonged fight. With the realization that he still had the edge, Lawrence was put at ease. He was able to push himself harder and defend himself with less effort. His wings faded away, replaced by his attack arm and his defense arm. He blocked one of Tucker's punches effortlessly with the latter, and then struck with the other. He swung it in a wide, sweeping motion. Tucker was forced to fall back to avoid being hit. Immediately the tables turned. With his added reach, Lawrence was able to push his injured opponent into the metaphorical corner. Now it was Tucker who had to give everything to defend himself. It was Tucker who didn't have a single chance to attack back. Lawrence's grin returned and then grew into a full-on wicked smile. He drew back his attack arm and thrust it at his opponent, but before he did, the image of his claws piercing Tucker's abdomen flashed in his mind again. He flinched, and almost didn't notice when, out of nowhere, another form entered his peripheral vision. Somehow, Jen had managed to get inside the wall of flames as well. Looking around, Lawrence realized that the flames had died down at some point during the recent exchange, while Lawrence had been too close to Tucker and his bright orange aura to notice. This had likely been his opponent's plan, an attempt to blindside him. Jen lunged at the space between Tucker and Lawrence, her fist raised, glowing with soft purple light. Lawrence swept at her with his attack arm, but she jumped over it, and Lawrence, worried that she would transfer more of her soul into him and slow him down at this crucial point in the fight, jumped back out of her reach. He was, however, once again surprised by one of his opponent's actions. He realized too late that Jen hadn't been aiming at him, but at her ally. She punched Tucker square in the chest, and he was sent flying, further than Lawrence would have expected. Jen turned toward Lawrence, and it was only then that he finally noticed that she had approached him and attacked Tucker, all while dragging one of her full-size sigils behind her by the toe of her left foot. She kicked it toward him, and he was too taken aback to react in time. The sigil sprang to its full size beneath him, and he fell to his knees, once again trapped within the intense downward pressure of his opponent's technique. Lawrence wasn't sure why Jen had turned on her ally. Was it a matter of pride? Did she want to prove herself by being the one to defeat Lawrence? She didn't seem the type, and so Lawrence was left wondering what she had planned. Either way, he knew how to escape this trap. He dissolved his attack arm and formed his bulky, armor-plated, full-body avatar around himself, lifting his regular body several feet off the ground. He raised his beefy fists to shatter the asphalt at his feet and break himself free, but before he could, Jen traced another sigil with her foot and kicked it at him as well. It joined with the one already beneath him, making it more complex and therefore more powerful. Lawrence stumbled, catching himself with one of his avatar's immense, bony hands. He had to strain, but slowly, surely, inch by inch, he raised his other arm, prepared to strike the ground at his feet. Jen was already tracing another sigil. Lawrence had to act quickly. His avatar was too strong for his opponents to penetrate, but if he couldn't move, he wouldn't be able to attack them back. The fight would be left at a stalemate, at least until Lawrence's teammates defeated their opponents and came to save him. That was a humiliation that Lawrence couldn't stand to suffer. He punched the ground, cracking it, breaking the second sigil but leaving the first intact. He raised his tired arm again, lifting the arm of his avatar along with it, just as Jen kicked her latest sigil not at Lawrence, but at something behind her. Lawrence watched, flabbergasted, as Tucker rejoined the fight. He ran, his torso surrounded by the soft purple light of Jen's gravity soul, into the newest sigil, and he jumped. It was only then that Lawrence realized that this third sigil was something new. Rather than an increased gravity sigil, this one reduced the pool of gravity on anyone inside it. Tucker was launched into the air, so high that Lawrence couldn't even see him in the low light of night. Then Lawrence could see him again when the entire sky was lit up by Tucker's turning, fiery aura. With visible effort, he turned his aura toward the ground, launching himself higher and a bit forward, until he was just above Lawrence. Meanwhile, Jen concentrated, directing Soul into her hand. An orb of soft purple light sprang into existence there, and she threw it at Tucker. Just as he passed into the radius of the sigil beneath Lawrence, that orb struck him in the chest, canceling the light left there by Jen's punch. Tucker dropped like a stone, but as he did, he turned his aura toward the sky, increasing its speed even more, dragging it behind him like the wings of some fiery bird. He fell toward Lawrence like a missile, fire wrapping his right hand. Lawrence raised his avatar's armored arms above his head to defend, just as Tucker called out, "Fire Fist!" He punched downward hard enough to tear clear through the armor plating of Lawrence's oversized reptilian avatar arms, clear through the arms themselves, and clear through the core of the avatar just beneath them. Tucker cried out in pain, but that didn't matter. His plan had succeeded. His attack had landed. Lawrence's entire avatar shattered, the force of Tucker's blow transferring back through it, leaving Lawrence hanging several feet in the air, stunned. Even as he fell, even as Jen sprang into the increased gravity sigil along with him, Lawrence still couldn't believe it. It still made no sense to him that he could lose. There had to be some kind of mistake, and yet there wasn't. Jen flipped and kicked him out of the air. He slammed into the ground beneath him with so much force that he was knocked out instantly. Despite all of his power and all of his confidence, Lawrence had been defeated. Standing over him, Jen and Tucker almost couldn't believe it either. They stared, stunned, at their fallen foe, and his still form. They caught their breath, and then, almost at the exact same time, they started laughing. It was a hearty laugh, and they may have gone right on laughing for minutes on end if Tucker hadn't collapsed.